Where do you think it came from? Like, what did the reliance on substances, where did that come from, do you think?
I think it started at 5 years old. People are like, what? No, my alcoholism and addiction.
You started early.
Yeah.
I'm going.
No, I know. My alcoholism and addiction to drugs didn't start at 5 years old. What started at 5 years old was this need to feel seen, feel accepted. My dad left when I was 5. Abandoned my mom and I. My brother left like shortly after that. And so it was just my mom and I. And as a kid, especially during those times, no one was saying like, hey, you need therapy. Like, you should probably talk to someone, like understand the inner workings of what's really happening. It wasn't like that. It was like, you're getting half the story from your mom, half the story from your dad, and you're an intelligent kid and the stories don't mesh. And so you get frustrated. And so I think it was an accumulation of those things. But I would say that most of it centered around wanting to be accepted and confusion around abandonment. My first drink wouldn't happen until I was 13. And it was given to me by my dad, who left when I was 5. And it was kind of a situation. We were with some friends in Tennessee. I was down there visiting him, and they'd been drinking, and they made a bet on whose son could chug a beer the fastest. And I saw it as an opportunity to make my dad proud. Before that, the only thing that I really had to make him proud was football. That's what I felt, or sports, baseball. He hated soccer, and so did I. But that was kind of an opportunity for me to make him proud, and I won. And I looked at him and I saw this sense of pride. And I was like, okay, this is just what we do now. And so I started to almost emulate his behavior. And my mom used to say it to me all the time, like, you know, you're acting like your dad, and it used to drive me nuts. But she was spot on. Like, all the things I pursued him so hard, but just because I wanted his love, that I did everything that I saw him do in hopes that he would see himself in me, kind of thing. And as a kid, you don't know that. You don't put that together. It's all subconscious. Like, it's not journaled, you know, but that's what's happening. And then I saw that once I got to high school as an opportunity to kind of like fit in. You know, the people that at that time that I wanted to be like, they were partying, they were drinking, they were having a good time every single weekend. And so I jumped into that lifestyle with both feet. And then that continued through college and so forth. But, you know, for me, I think it started at a really young age, and I think most people's struggles with substance, alcohol, sex, gambling, material addiction, like whatever their avenue is, I think it starts with not being okay with oneself. I think that's like the atom of origination, if that makes sense. Like, that's where it begins. And then it kind of blossoms from there. And the first thing that people find that makes them feel better usually turns into their drug of choice. And I don't mean just substance, right? So for me, I think it started at a very young age. And it's almost like a conditioning. And so, yeah, it didn't start with the first drink. Yeah. You know,
I don't mean to make light of it, but have you ever seen The Comebackers?
No.
The movie? Mm-mm. This scene where this guy's like, I think he's a coach. And he's like, son, I went 11 straight years without drinking a beer. And then he's like, then what happened? He's like, I turned 12. That kind of reminds me of what you just said. And I, like I said, I don't mean to make light of it, but that was it's a funny movie. Nonetheless, the actual day-to-day, because I heard you on another podcast say something like you justified it, which I found so fascinating, because you were performing, you were getting raises, you were getting promotions, you were doing well at work. And so you're like, if somebody has a problem, they're not doing what I'm doing, right? Because I'm getting these positive feedback loops from other avenues of my life. That to me was really interesting to hear, because if every other indication in your life is pointing like in a good direction, it could be very easy to, that habit's not bad. Yeah. If it was bad, I wouldn't be getting more money and more responsibility and stuff. What was like what had to happen for you to actually like realize, oh wait, I do have a problem?
So I was able to justify it starting at a young age, and I think the more intelligent you are, the easier it is. And that's not just, again, it's not just drugs and alcohol. It's all the things we do in our life that we know we probably shouldn't be entertaining. But the moment for me, like, it was never legal troubles. I went to jail 4 times. I should have went to jail 100 times. I've woken up in I don't know how many random houses, backyards, in a vehicle parked off the side of the road somewhere, in a ditch. Like, it's all happened. none of those moments for me, and people are like scoff at this, and that's fine. None of those moments for me, like, was I ever like, you know what? I should stop this. This might be a problem. It was like, damn, I knew I shouldn't have taken that last shot. You know, it was like
crazy night.
Yeah, that's how it was. Or I'd justify it again because that would happen all weekend, and I'd get to work on Monday and I'd get celebrated. You know, there was a time towards the end of my career that I was in, within like a 3-week span, I got essentially employee of the year of this company with like 4,000, 5,000 employees, the largest structural repair company in the world. And then within a couple weeks of that, there was a letter written to HR talking about how bad of a human I really was. So that right there was like the first, maybe we'll call it like item of polarity, where I was like, you know what, like, which guy am I? Am I the guy on the company website that's the best employee, that's top producer, making the company good money, building good culture, building good teams, or am I this guy in this 8-page letter to HR? And the truth of it was, and I refused to see it at this time, I do now, was that the letter to HR was the truth. Like, I was all of that. And I think, you know, again, it takes what it takes. And that's why I tell people that are struggling, or they're close to people that are struggling, you can't create their bottom. You got to give that up. It's just going to wear you out. It's just going to tax you. It's just going to exhaust you. I watched my entire family try for years. My bottom came from a moment in the mirror where I actually looked into my own soul, like through my eyes, and it disgusted me. It was like mental, emotional, physical, complete disgust. Like, I didn't know who I was looking at, what I was looking at. And that was it for me. That was enough to be like, you know what? This ain't it. This is not who it's supposed to be. And I knew how my life was going to end at that time. It was either going to be of some level of alcoholism, drug addiction or overdose, or suicide. That's where my head was at. So my options were pretty limited, right? It was like those 3 things, or we just, like, this sounds kind of bad, but essentially try to kill ourselves in this opposite direction and see what happens. Mm-hmm. And I chose the opposite direction because I hadn't experienced that yet. But yeah, that I stopped justifying in the mirror that night.
What does it feel like, if you could just expound on that, like, what does it feel like to look at yourself in the mirror and feel abject disgust? Like, to look in your own eyes and feel that way, if you had to describe it.
It's a great question. I would say it's as a kid, did you ever have like nightmares or visions of hell?
Not hell in the sense that we think about it, but I had nightmares of like very, very scary, or like sort of like eternal loops of like scary things, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. So the closest analogy I can draw, in that moment, it was like seeing myself in hell, in the flames with the devil, on an eternal loop. And I mean, I can't, it's really difficult to put into words, honestly. It's nauseating. It puts a pit in my stomach still to this day, because it's like, it's so tangible. Like, I can go back there, I can access it. And I have again, if I needed to. And that's important to me. I don't want to forget it. But I would say that that's probably, and I've heard that experience from other people, that's probably the experience needed to hit bottom. It's like, okay, this is what hell looks like. Mm-hmm. Like, I am hell, right? And that was kind of that moment.
Yeah. There's this, like, the idea of like bringing heaven to earth, right? That's obviously a goal for most people. It's like you want to bring more good things, bring more true, good, and beautiful things to earth. The opposite of that would be bringing hell to earth. And I suppose that looking in the mirror and kind of having a realization that, dang, am I bringing hell to earth? Like, am I making earth more hellish for other folks, myself included? That's got to be a pretty like tumultuous thing to experience. And to be honest with you, I don't think a lot of people, even if they necessarily should or are looking at themselves in the mirror, I don't think a lot of people have the wherewithal or the honesty to reflect with that much candor on their own eternal or internal state. Was there like any particular moment that like led up to that, or was like literally you just like walked in the mirror one day and like it was like a divine intervention, like this is happening now?
No, so I'd tried to quit several times. And I'd do, 10 days here, 14 days here. But essentially from the time I was 13 until I was 30, I never strung together 30 days of sobriety from drugs and alcohol. I tried to quit. I tried all these different things. And that night that I got sober, it was July 18th. My birthday was July 19th. So I was turning 30 that night. And I had a couple buddies in town. One was playing for the Titans at the time. Other one's in medical sales. Super successful men. Good men. And they're in the kitchen having a conversation. And they're talking about, family, investing. And I'm sitting on the couch in the other room in my apartment on my birthday talking about like trying to find Coke. That's what I was doing. I was hitting up every dealer I knew trying to find it. Because at that time during COVID, cocaine was like Uber Eats. I mean, they'd bring it to you.
Yeah.
And so that's what I was trying to do, but I couldn't get anyone to hit, which was rare. Like you could usually get it anytime, any day. I couldn't get anyone to hit on it. And I looked in there and saw their conversation, and then I'm like, and I'm over here trying to find Coke just for me so I can go hide in my own bathroom and do it while my buddies are here. Mm-hmm. And it was this moment, something just grabbed me. This is no lie. It was like, go to the bathroom. Just go to the bathroom. I didn't have to take a piss. I didn't have to do anything. It was just like, go to the bathroom. I was like, so I looked at like the clock. It was like 11:56 p.m., something like that. So it was right before midnight, which was my birthday. And I walked into the bathroom, and that's where I looked in the mirror. And so to me, and that's why I talk about God, like I didn't find God in a church pew. I was in hell. Mm-hmm. I was in the trenches. And that's why it's so important to me, I think, to connect with people that are also in hell or in the trenches. Because just because you go to church, right, or you're in a church pew, doesn't mean you're not living in hell, right? But I find it easier to connect with the people that are like actively living in that place because I've been there. And so I had that moment in the mirror, and I made a deal with God, essentially. The conversation went a little bit like, all I said out loud was, I'm ready if you're ready. And then I told God, I said, look, I won't die of alcohol, drugs, or suicide. I give you my word, but I'm going to push everything else to the absolute max. You take me when you're ready. I'm at peace with it. That was the conversation. And I walked back out there to the living room area. My buddies were out there, and I told them, like, I'm done drinking. And they both looked at me, and they just said, they're like, hell yeah, man. Like, they knew it was something different.
Yeah.
And that was like the first bit of belief anyone had ever given me too. Like, it wasn't like, oh, okay, here we go again. It was like, hell yeah, man. And so I went to bed that night and woke up, and day one. Mm-hmm. So it's not this story of this like crazy bottom. I had all the bottoms. It was me literally looking at myself that broke me. But what got me in there to look at myself, the only thing that I can chalk that up to is God. God knew I was ready to go look at it and do something about it. So he gave me the opportunity to.
Yeah. Steve Jobs has a quote, like something like you cannot connect the dots looking forward. They only connect looking backwards. And for me, as soon as you said the part about nobody's hitting you up about cocaine, and I mean, I went to college. I know just how easy it is to get cocaine in about any place at about any time. Mm-hmm. That to me reminds me of like the idea where you're late to somewhere, you're driving, and like it's a long red light or something, and you're pissed off. Well, maybe God just held you there because you're going to get on a wreck. Like like God puts these things in front of you that you don't know what they're protecting you from, and so maybe like what came to mind is, well, what if it did hit that night? What if somebody did come through?
Yep.
Would you have ever had that experience, or did you just miss the opportunity that God was waiting for you?
Yeah, I think about that all the time.
That's talk about inducing gratitude. I mean,
well, that's why people ask, would I change anything? And the answer is no. Do I wish I didn't hurt so many people along the way? Sure. There's no doubt. I deeply wish I could have avoided that for them and for me. But as far as changing what needed to happen in order to get to that point, I wouldn't change a thing. It all happened exactly how it needed to happen in order for me to make the change that I needed to make. So.
Yeah. Young said, I think it was Young or maybe it was Nietzsche, but one of them said, for a tree to touch heaven, its roots must touch hell. Mm-hmm. Have you heard that before?
Yeah.
What does that make you think?
It was that moment, right? I finally was willing to admit I was in hell. I justified it. But once I got to a place where I like, this is my own personal hell. I'm in hell. I think that for me, it was kind of like, back to polarity. I don't think you have to live in either one of those places or both of those places at the same time. It's more like you choose. You could make your life hell when you walk out of here today. Fast. And people, that's another thing around breaking the stigma. People act like they're so distant from any type of challenge like this. It's next door. You just knock on the wrong door at the wrong time. It's got you. And so for me, I think heaven and hell is ever present all the time, but it's what you choose, and what your choices do is either get you closer to heaven or closer to hell. And so for me, I think when you talk about the tree analogy, we're on the tree. I'm not the tree. I'm on the tree.
Yeah. You've gotten the opportunity to go speak to some young high schoolers.
Yeah.
Back in your hometown. First question about that is like, what does that feel like? Like to be in a position now where people are looking to you to. I mean, I'm laughing now thinking about you like waking up in a damn car on the side of the road like not so long ago, and now you're talking to kids about the decisions you made and how they can steer their life in a better direction. How does that feel to be in that position?
I don't think it's settled in, if that makes sense. I don't think I've really embraced it all the way. It's came so fast. The first time I spoke was back in April, and it was to like a couple PE classes, right? It was like 50 kids, which was a lot. I mean, I was like nervous, I'm sweating up there. I'm like, this is,
much like 11-year-olds. You're just
yeah. And I'm just terrified. And then this past time when I was home, it was like God had his hand on it. Like, no joke. It was like I had there was a couple of engagements scheduled. We ended up speaking 13 times to over 5,000 kids. And it was only supposed to be like 3 times. And it just kept going. And I just kept saying yes. So much so that like the people around me were like, hey, you're going to need to say no. Like, I can see it.
Yeah.
It's taking a toll. But for me, that's living, right? I've never been more alive than that level of exhaustion, because I actually felt like I was doing something that mattered. And it's been a long time in my life. I've spent a long time in my life. I didn't feel that way. I didn't feel like I had really any impact. So that part of it's been great. But the best part for me, hands down, is the kids. Like when they come up afterwards and the things that they share that they're going through, I didn't have anywhere, like I didn't have the awareness for one, but I wasn't near bold enough at that age to walk up there and tell a complete stranger, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. This is what's going on in my house. What do I do about it? And it keeps happening. And so I don't think my purpose is kind of shifted, honestly. And it's really shifted towards the youth of just being like, hey, here's my life. This is what happens if you do what I do, or worse, right? I'm fortunate to be alive. A lot of people end up in the newspaper who live the way that I live. But this is what it looks like. You can find yourself on this graph anywhere you want, wherever you're at, and you can stop, and then you can head this other direction. Like, here's the evidence. This is what it looks like. And so I think it's relatable to kids because educators are great, right? They teach whatever content they're provided to teach. But I think it's different for a kid when someone comes in, great voice or not, I don't know. But like tattoos, kind of a little bit of a snarl about him, like doesn't care, and just gives them the real and uses the words like suicide and cocaine and alcohol. I think that for kids, they hear that because they're feeling that, they're thinking that already. But to hear someone say it, they can attach to it. There was a couple of different speeches where people were like, hey, can you not say these specific words? And I was like,
no,
good luck. Like, I'm not halving this truth.
Yeah.
I can't speak that way. That's not how God speaks through me. And they'd be like, all right, well, I guess. And then I would do the speech, and every single time God showed up, because whatever words they told me not to say, there would be a kid walk up right in front of them and be like, hey, when you talked about suicide and self-harm, that deeply connected with me. I've been struggling with that. And I would just look at them like, this is the issue. You got to say it out loud. It's uncomfortable, sure, but they're feeling it. So the only way to help them not feel it is to bring that feeling out of them. The only way to do that is to make them feel safe enough to do so.
Yeah.
You do that by leading by example and saying, I feel that. I know what that feels like. It makes them comfortable. So I think my purpose is shifting again towards the youth, but also like rewiring some of the adult thinking that exists. Everything these kids are going through is an adult problem. Adults created it. We need to take accountability. We need to change it. People are like, oh, this generation, those kids. Who raised them? You know what I mean? Like, what are you talking about? You're not free of this. And so I think that's been the most rewarding part is just the kids. And I wouldn't trade that or change that for anything.
That's fascinating. Isn't it funny how it works where it's I mean, God works in funny ways, but it's mysterious ways rather. They tell you not to say a word because it could be triggering. Maybe it's that exact trigger that needs to be released or pulled to get some kid to come up to you and say, hey, look, like that, this is actually, wow, can't believe somebody said this. I've been in high school or I've been in public school or whatever school for 14 years and nobody's ever said this to me as if it's a real problem. But when you said that, I realized like that's something that I'm going through. It's interesting how it's probably a protection mechanism. I don't have kids and I'm a relatively young man, so like I'm not going to pretend to act like I know all the answers, but I would imagine it's out of like you don't want a kid to like experience touching the flame. You don't want them to get burned, so it's like you just keep the oven off, but sometimes that's literally what you need. You just need to touch it and oh wait. You know what I'm saying? So it's like probably a protection mechanism on their end, but I can also speak from personal experience, like the amount of any school student in America had plenty of people come in and talk to them. I can guarantee you that if like one of my teachers tried to come in and talk about this, that was just like a run-of-the-mill person, said something, I would forget it. But you're exactly right. You're a bigger dude, come in here with tattoos, talking about some real stuff. That's like people are like, oh wait, this is not in the norm.
Yeah.
Which definitely, what would you say? It definitely like arouses more interest. It makes people actually invested in what you have to say because you're an anomaly in that way.
And I think that's helpful for kids too, because kids are smart, right? They are. They're smarter than we give them credit for. But I go back to this thing that I've been telling myself recently, and it's be a citizen, not an employee. I ain't working for nobody except God, right? I'm a citizen though, and I care about my community, and I want to help my community. But people are afraid to be vulnerable because they're afraid of what their employer might do. They're more worried about what the CEO, like if they work at, I don't know, Goodyear. They're more worried about what the regional sales president of Goodyear thinks about them versus what God thinks, right? They don't want to let their boss down. What about God, right? Where's that thinking? How do we get back to that? And so it's deeper than just saying, I don't work for anyone. I'm saying like, I only work for one. And I think once we can get more people closer to that, the world's going to be a better place because you don't care about judgment anymore. What are you going to say to me or do to me? Really? Like that's going to take my life to a bottom deeper than I've already created for myself at one point. Like I challenge any human to put me there. They can't. God can, but I'm not giving another human that power. And I think that's kind of the issue though, because we're so dependent on a paycheck. I get it. You need money. You got to have money to survive. But people are paid to say certain things, believe certain things, do certain things. And the kids see that too. Where do you think they learn it? You know, like, well, this is what's in. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I fit in. Whereas like, and I'm not a dad yet either. It's one of my dreams. I am a dad, right? But not yet. And I say that because of this book that I'm reading. It's like speaking things into existence, like being them already.
Yeah. What's the book?
I'll get you the name of it. I can't just had like a massive brain fart. Brett's the one who told me to read it. He's reading it right now.
There you go. Atomic Habits?
Yes.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, but it's about like saying like, not saying, you don't say, I want to be a husband one day. You say, I am a husband. Become it.
Yeah.
Right? And so I try to do that too, but I don't remember where I was going with that. Point being, I think it's so important just to, like, if you want to make an impact, you have to be honest, a lasting impact. It's the same with building a company. You could do it the short, fast, easy way. It's going to flame out. People will pick up on it. You know, they're going to write bad reviews. They're going to say that you lied. But if you do it the long and the hard way and you're honest about it and you're truthful about it, it's going to last. And I think your word's the same way.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson always talks about how telling the truth is the biggest adventure. And like when I think about the what do you call them? What do they call them? The golden handcuffs of like the corporate world, or the recurring paycheck. I've heard it said that sex, heroin, and the recurring paycheck are the three most addicting things. That's there's that. See, because I understand both sides, because I see like you jeopardizing the protection, being able to provide for your family is not something that you should take lightly as a parent or as a person, right? That's very important. But at what point do you draw the line that you're, like you said, not being truthful to yourself, like you're having to quell or sort of cover up? Maybe your workplace is doing something that you don't agree with, but you're like, oh, well, I don't want to lose my job. But like you're basically perpetuating something that you genuinely don't agree with. You know, I love what you just said. Whose judgment are you more afraid of, or who do you fear more?
Yeah.
Solomon says all wisdom begins with the fear of the Lord. Who do you fear more, that your boss or the eternal judgment of the creator of the universe, you know?
God doesn't care when you get to the pearly gates if you say, well, I only did that because my boss thought it was the right thing. He doesn't care about that. He's no interest in that, right? And so I'm with you on it. And I think, again, as you work through these different things in life, I don't have all the answers. These are all like lessons that I got beat over the head with for years, and I finally was like, oh, okay, this makes sense. But when I think about, like, every day when I wake up, one of my goals, or one of the things I strive to be or to do, is to be able to look God in the eyes one day and say, I did good today, right? I can't change my first 30 years. I can't change yesterday, but I can change today. And it goes into this conversation around identity too, not to like totally,
no, it's true,
like transition, but you are what you do, not what you did. You are what you do repeatedly. Now, people might view you as what you did because they have evidence of it that exists for a long period of time. That's fair. And you should use discernment like that too when it comes to people. But people think that it's impossible to change. And I don't buy into that. I don't. Go look at my story. You telling me it's impossible to change? Like, no, you're lying. But it's what you do. And then that becomes your identity. And I think once you you can embrace your identity and say, like, I want to make God proud, like, put that first, then you'll, like, I made a post the other day, like, I'm proud of myself. It took me my whole life to say that out loud. But the only reason I'm proud of myself, I believe, is because I wanted to make God proud. And by striving to do that, I was able to find peace and pride within myself. But if I just did it for myself, I'm never going to get there, right? There's no greater purpose. And so, yeah, I think when it comes back to the God thing, and I'm not a Bible thumper by any means, you know this about me. My relationship with God's my relationship with God. But if it wasn't for that, and it wasn't for what he did in my life, I wouldn't be here today. So I have no issue sharing that testimony and that his, like, glorifying him. And it's not that I fear he would strike me dead if I didn't. It's that's how, like, I had to learn about God through my own avenue. Like, someone forcing it on me wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
And so by doing that, I see that there's probably other people out there like me that are stubborn, that don't need to be told what to do, but they like to listen about what's happened with you and then apply it to their own lives. That's how I was. And so that's why when I tell my message, I don't thump the Bible. I just say, hey, God saved me. This is how. This is what I believe. This is what happened. Do with it what you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I was just reminded of is I don't know where in the Bible it is. I'm thumping a Bible.
Yeah.
He who exalts himself will be humbled. It's that simple. But he who exalts the Lord will be, or no, he who humbles himself will be exalted. You're exactly right. It's interesting when we try to lift ourselves up how it can backfire.
Well, we're both from the South. The way that I say that scripture is, I humble myself so God doesn't have to. Right? For me, that just makes more sense. I start saying words like exalted, I get dizzy. But if I say I humble myself so God doesn't have to, that just resonates with me.
Yeah.
And I feel like I could go talk to anybody in any tree stand in the Southeast, here in the next couple months and say that line and they'd understand hell yeah, brother. You know, it's like,
Damn right.
yeah, exactly. And so for me, that's how it connected. But I certainly don't hate the Bible. I love it.
Yeah.
There's a plethora of life-saving information in there in so many directions. For me, like the humbling part, that's why I run.
Yeah.
That's the only reason.
To humble yourself?
Yeah. So God doesn't have to. I know if I go suffer and put myself through some form of like man-made hell, whatever God's got for me that day, like I genuinely feel like isn't going to be that bad. At least I choose to believe that. And he might smack me one day, and that's fine.
He might smack all of us, man.
Yeah, for sure. But at the end of the day, I never come off a run and I'm like, I want to go be a dick to that guy standing over there I don't know. Or I want to like get road rage.
Yeah.
Or I want to like treat someone poorly in my family or my inner circle. No, it's the opposite. Like I have grace for that guy that's angry in traffic. I have grace for the homeless person that's on the corner asking for money for a beer. I have grace for my family member that's frustrated with something else going on in their life and projecting it on me. Running gives me that. And, if running went away, I would have to find a different avenue for that. But if I don't have that, ego starts to take over. God kind of gets pushed to the side, like metaphorically speaking. And I don't show up as my best self. So that's why I run.
Running, I had this thought earlier. You got up, you gained some weight when you were on this path towards hell, more or less, right?
Yep.
I'm guessing that had something to do with like the way that you felt about yourself. If that's the case, correct me if I'm wrong. If that's the case, how important was the actual like health transformation in your transformation, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so quick story on food. I always had an eating problem my whole life. I always binge ate. And I mean, you've seen me at the meat events. Like I'll eat like 7
right
plates of steak,
you,
dude, until I'm sick for 3 days.
Yep.
Right? We had that experience.
Yep.
No regrets. But I've always had something there. But I played sports my whole life. And everyone around, parents included, are like, oh, he's just a grown boy. He eats like a horse. You eat me out of house and I've heard it all.
You get called donkey ever?
No, I was garbage disposal. This is like my style.
There you go.
Like whatever was left on the plates, I ate. And so, but when you stop playing sports, you're not burning any calories, but I'm eating the same. Well, when sports ended, my hard drug habit picked up probably, I would say 6 to 8 months after I was done playing college football. Because people always ask, like, how'd you gain so much weight if you're doing coke? Well, it was real simple. I only did coke Friday through Sunday and drank Friday through Sunday every single week. But Monday through Thursday, I had this self-hate, pain, whatever I needed to deal with. So I ate my feelings Monday through Thursday. So I graduated at 2:30 playing ball. My peak weight at the end was 312, which is a lot of meat.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot.
Big fella.
And I was probably on those Monday through Thursdays eating 6,000 to 8,000 calories a day. Easy. And so for me, like it was, when I got sober, it wasn't, and here's the other thing about sobriety and recovery, and people probably won't love this, but this is how I feel about it. If I meet someone and they're like, hey, Trip, I want to get sober. Can you help me out? Right? And I say, okay, absolutely. Start by doing X, Y, and Z. And if they look at me and they say, well, I'll do X and Y, but I'm not really feeling Z, I just walk away. And it's not because I don't like them or I don't want them to get better. They're just not ready. When I got sober, there was this willingness, I'll do anything. I wanted it all. And I told you I made a deal with God. I'll max everything out. So it had to be all of it. I wasn't willing to just like dip my toe in any of it. I was like, I'm going to drown myself in this. If it's the nutrition, if it's the fitness, if it's building a business, if it's my faith, if it's being of service to the community that saved my life, whatever those things are, I'm going to do that all in. And so it wasn't, I never struggled like that. You know, it was like, I never gave myself the space. I was like, this is what it is. And this is all it's going to be. And, you know, I'll die when I die. And I still live that way. My weight's fluctuated. I've gotten as heavy as probably 230 and as light as probably 203, depending on what I'm training for, right? But I have this awareness now, especially around food. I'm talking about it of like, all right, I'm probably slipping a little bit. Like I probably shouldn't have crumble 3 times a week. That's an issue, right? Or, we don't need to have pizza twice a week. Because I'll go through bouts where I eat super clean for 60, 90 days, no cheat meals. And then I'll go through bouts where I cheat once a week. And so my relationship with food certainly isn't perfect. And I don't think a lot of people's is, to be honest with you. But I think that the weight loss was just a byproduct of the work. And for me, like I knew I could get back into shape. Like if you've ever been in shape, you know what it feels like. You go run that first mile at 3:12 and you were a D1 athlete. It would have been 8 years prior to that. It's humbling. I ran it. That mile was 16:37. That's what it took me to get it done. And it was humbling. And it was like, oh, you're not a D1 football player at all. Like you're like, you have to be honest with yourself. I was a fat piece of shit.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Like, and I know that might be like, like aggressive for some people, but it was true for me. And so, yeah, I don't know. I do know this though, and this ties the weight loss into the running. People say you can outrun a bad diet, right? Like if you just run enough. I don't buy that because I can eat enough to gain weight and still run. I gained 17 pounds in August when I did the 406 miles. That's insane.
Yeah.
It's the most volume I've ever even came close to touching in my life, and I gained 17 pounds.
Yeah.
How does one do that? Well, one says, I have unlimited resources when it comes to food. I eat all the carbs I can get my hands on, and it's going to fuel me. Well, at the end of that, it took like 3 days to lose the 17 pounds. And all I didn't stop eating. I just went back to what I was eating. And my body was like, oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Inflammation, everything kind of left. So the weight, you asked about it. I know I gave you a really long-winded answer there, but it's more or less for me always been a struggle. But when I got sober, it was a non-negotiable. It was like, you're going to be in the best shape of your life, period.
Well, no, I think that's important. I have a really good friend who got up to 300 pounds in high school in like a year and then turned his life around, and now he's a professional athlete. So it's just cool. It's one of those things I always freaking loved and respected and admired about him, because I don't think people see that. Like I didn't see that part of him, actually. Like I didn't know him at that time, but I just like to think that I like to envision him when he's day 15, like, so the initial momentum of, I'm going to lose all this weight, but damn, I really don't want to do anything today, or damn, that oatmeal cream pie is looking me in the face. I like to envision that type of person on day 15 running up that hill again, 70 pounds still to go to get to his goal weight. That's where that fortitude is forged, I think. And it's, you mentioned something, I'm glad you brought this up. There's this idea that rock bottom, I can't remember who tweeted it, but I saw a tweet where it's like most people don't let themselves get to rock bottom. And basically it was saying that that's like a negative in a way. Like you don't get to, because the reason I remembered this is when you said, somebody says, hey, I'll do X, Y, but I'm not doing Z. When you get to rock bottom, at least from what I understand, the people that I've spoken with, like you just said, it's not a question of if you'll do X, Y, and Z. It's I'll do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever else is the alphabet, like all 26 of them. You'll do everything. You'll do anything. And that only happens when I think you get to rock bottom, which is interesting because I don't know why this is, but I think a lot of people, for some reason, I do have a theory about this and I'll explain it briefly, but for some reason, I think people don't get to that rock bottom where they really will, like they will literally do anything. And the reason I think that is because I think I call them painkillers, and I'm guilty of this myself. Food, video games, porn, social media, drugs, bad friends, going out, sports, the list is endless. These are all like tiny painkillers that we consume throughout the day that I think they can numb us from feeling, they're a veil in between us and the actual pain that God's trying to make us feel, so that we'll make that change, so that we'll do that Z. But for some reason, those painkillers are just powerful enough to not let us feel that last little 10th or 20th% of pain that would get us to be like, oh my gosh, I can't take this anymore. Does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah. The mental emotional side of it, like the darkness or the depths of that, I think without that, there is no bottom. Right? If you're able to still justify, the other thing people don't talk enough about is like a lot of people never get sober because of the people around them enable them. And I don't mean just give them drugs. I mean, make sure they got food, a place to sleep, make sure that they're okay. You know, the enablers a lot of times keep them in their addiction. One thing that was big for me was my mom stepped away towards the end of my run. And she didn't do it in like an abrasive way. It wasn't like an F you, nothing like that. It was like, I love you, but I can't help you anymore. And something about that, the woman that raised me from the time I was 5, and was my mom and my dad in a lot of ways, who's never abandoned me, never let me down, also never lied to me. So the accumulation of all that, and then her saying that, I was like, oh, I'm going to lose the person that would never, ever leave me because of this. And that was a wake-up call for me too. And that was part of my bottom. But the mental, emotional bottom, for me, it was kind of like there's nothing I can do to make this worse other than doing what I'm like still doing, right? If I do more drugs or I drink more or have more suicidal ideation, like, yes, it can get worse. But if I literally do anything but those 3 things, it can only get better. So it's like I looked at it from like an abundance mindset versus a limited mindset. I was like, I have a million options to get out of this.
That's a really good, I've never thought about that before.
Yeah, I was like, I'm just going to do them all.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I've never thought about that. It's like, well, I've done all these things. If I literally do anything in the opposite direction of those things, it makes it a little simpler too.
Yeah.
Because there's so many different things like, oh, well, what do I do? What do I do? Literally, you can do the opposite of those 3 things. What you just said about your mom that's so powerful too. There's this idea that the good mother necessarily fails. Have you ever heard that before?
No.
So it's the idea that mothers are protective. Like this is why they fail. So their objective is to protect their child, their offspring. A good mother necessarily fails at that. So you mentioned enabling. It's like, oh, well, he's my son, so he'll always have a place to stay, or he's not going to be homeless, or I know he's done this, but this last time, you know? And so I can imagine that being pretty powerful to have, like you said, the woman that never lied to you. That's also very important. Never lied to you, cared for you, loved you, raised you, sort of distance herself. In her own way, I think she failed like that, like in a good way. Mm-hmm. Jordan Peterson would call it the female crucifixion, I believe, which is, it's just interesting how all these things culminate for you at across these this period of time where you hit that point, and then for some reason God gave you the wherewithal. God gave you He spoke to you in a way that allowed you to hear Him, and then you're able to start taking those steps upward. And on that note, when you started taking those, unless you had something to add about that, sorry.
You good?
When you started taking the steps upward, like I just mentioned, day 15, I'm 100% certain that you had your fair share of days that maybe that cocaine dealer's number started looking a little more enticing, that bar looked a little bit more enticing, that pizza, that cookie, whatever it was, and then the not running looked like damn enticing. What was it that got you through those days, or got you to step outside and take that step?
I didn't give myself space to have those days. I get that question a good bit, and I think if you have space for those thoughts, you're allowing that space. I stayed so busy. I mean, you got to remember during this time, like 45 days in, I quit my career and moved across the country with nothing. Engine blew up in my truck, didn't have a job, fell off a deck, broke my ribs and my hip. 8 days later, ran a 5K. Like I was gone, dude. I was out there. I was like, I made that deal with God that I'm going to push everything to the absolute max. What was crazy is once I did that and I found this peace and I could sleep, I wanted to bury myself every day, physically, mentally, emotionally. If I couldn't run anymore, I picked up a book. If I couldn't read anymore, I put my running shoes on. If I couldn't do those things anymore, I would go for a walk and cry. It was all about doing everything all day long and just having faith that it was going to work out. And every day that I did those things, the path just got brighter and brighter and brighter until one day the sun was out, right? But people, when they ask, like, how did you get through those day 15s? I couldn't tell you. I didn't pick my head up for 14 months. Like, 14 months was 312 to 207 at the start line of a full Ironman. Like, I didn't pick my head up. You don't got time to pick your head up when you're early on. People are like, how do you keep from losing momentum? You don't stop. That simple. Don't overcomplicate it. If you have momentum, the only way to maintain it is to keep going. People are like, well, you need a break. You need to give yourself grace. And it's like, that's great. But this also works, right? This method also works. And so, yeah, I don't remember having any of those, like, those crazy days. Like I did before, like the numerous times I tried to quit before. But once that all happened with God, and I felt like early on, if I didn't hold up to that promise, like I was dead and I didn't want to die. And so it was like, okay, I hear you. Like, you'll kill me when you're ready. And like, that's what allowed me to lose the 100 pounds. That's what allowed me to maintain the nutrition while training for an Ironman. Like, I was depleted the entire 14 months and building for this Ironman. That was all God. God gave me the power to do that. I just had to put my shoes on. Don't get it twisted. I wasn't some unearthly savage out here just like tough as nails. I just put my shoes on. And I trusted that God would clear the path that I was supposed to take. And so because I leaned into it that heavily, I never had that day 3 or 7 or 92 where I was like, oh, I'm itching for a drink. I honestly can't look at you in the eye and tell you the last time I wanted a drink of alcohol. I've had nightmares that I relapsed. Those suck. Because you'll wake up and be like, oh God, I can't tell anyone that I did that. We'll just maintain my sobriety. Like, cause you're in a fog, obviously, when you first wake up. And then you wake up the next day and you're like, oh, thank God. Like, that would have been horrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I haven't had a single craving. But I think that's because of what I replaced it with. I actually put a focus into fixing the root. If you don't fix the root, the leaves come back every year the same, right? And if the tree itself, if like the ecosystem or the system of the tree itself is damaged, those leaves never come truly to fruition, right? They're always like, it's like a half-assed tree. You see them driving down the road. You're like, damn, you should just kill that thing. You know what I mean? We're a lot like that. But if you go into the tree and fix whatever disease is tearing it up at its root, you're gonna get green leaves again. And so for me, it was like therapy, AA. I got heavily involved in AA. I did 3 meetings a day for 9 months straight, which is sickening amount of AA. But again, if I had space, that's what I was doing. And if I wasn't doing that, I was running there. If I wasn't doing that, I was reading a book. Like, it was just endless. And so I didn't give myself time to have those days.
Teddy Roosevelt, one thing that I've been diving into recently is the amount of prolific men that we would consider heroes. A few off the top of my head: Teddy Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, Abraham Lincoln, John D. Rockefeller. The list goes on and on. Of men that had depressive episodes or battled with, and I don't mean like manic depression to the point where they couldn't move, but like these men legitimately they battled with their entire lives this tendency to get into depressed states. Teddy Roosevelt, I don't think he said it, but one of his guiding principles in life, because he had suicide in his family, he had depression in his family, he experienced immense tragedy in his youth. His mom and his dad died. His mom and his wife died on the same day, and that was a couple years after his dad died. So he's like 21 years old, 23 years old, no wife, no mom, no dad. All that to say, he had this saying that he lived by: black care never sits behind a rider whose pace is fast enough.
Yeah.
So, I mean, then you look at like all the things that he did and that were positively influential, like unequivocally positively influential for himself and for his community and for the nation and for the world. There's truth in that, because on the other hand, idle hands are the devil's playground. And I think that there's nuance to it, obviously, but black care never sits behind the rider whose pace is fast enough. So it makes sense to me that you never had those days because you're riding fast enough. And that's just an interesting way to look at it, because I think a lot of people are, oh, I have to like self-reflect, I have to spend time, all this stuff, and that there's utility in that, I'm sure. I'm not going to sit here and say that there's not, or that I know whether or not that works, but my temperament, it sounds like yours is the same, would be to just like outwork depression, outwork that thought, if that makes sense.
This is what I believe happens with all that. When it's time to self-reflect and be still, God will sit you down. That's my relationship with God. If God's not sitting me down, I don't need to reflect right now. I need to keep going. The reflection he wants me to see is 3 months from now, not today, right? And what I found is, for me, those reflections take place exactly when they're supposed to happen. The first time I looked up and brought my head out of the dirt was 14 months, and it was the last mile of the Ironman. And Natasha, who you know, was there. She was on her bike. Everyone was done, finished. The whole team celebrating. I'm out there just in the Sufferfest, living my dream. Mm-hmm. And she's like, you gonna run it in, Trip, and finish this thing out? And I was like, no, I think I'm gonna walk the last mile. And she's like, what? And I was like, I just need a minute. I'm gonna take a minute. And even in that moment, I was scared. I was like, God, what if my body locks up and I don't make it on the last mile? But something told me to slow down. And I did. I spent the next mile, and this is something I'm forever grateful for, just looking in the mirror and being like, holy shit. Like, you're about to cross this finish line. It's been 1 year and 2 months. Your mom's at the finish line. Your biological father's at the finish line. Your brother's at the finish line. This is what happens when you do what you're supposed to do every single day for 14 months. This is what's possible. And so God wanted me to have that reflection then. And he sat my ass down. He sat me down when I got to Austin and fell off that deck. There was time to reflect then. That's why the business got started. That depressive state that was honestly I was forced into created the opportunity to start a business. The one at the Ironman gave me the opportunity to realize, like, okay, I never want to do an Ironman again. I'm definitely selling my bike tomorrow, and like, I'm good. Like, but I also knew I needed the process. I didn't care about the race. If you go in my house in New Braunfels, as soon as you go in the back door, I have like a pantry area. Every medal I've ever gotten from anything is just thrown up there on the shelf. I don't give a shit about medals, belt buckles, any of it. It means nothing. What means something to me is the Trip that exists today wakes up, puts his running shoes on, and goes and runs at least 10 miles. Like, that's non-negotiable. That's what's going to happen. Rain or shine, pain or not, doesn't matter. But that is the process that I fell in love with. The medals and the awards or the weight loss, that's all byproduct. That's all outcome-based. The systems which you take and you become obsessive in, that's the gift. That's the gift, because I can sleep at night. And peace of mind has quickly over the last 4.5 years turned into the most important thing in my life. And there's nothing greater. And the way I achieve that, though, is showing up as my best self. When you're in addiction, you can't do that. And that's why a lot of people, especially the more intelligent you are, suffer the deepest, because you're aware. Like, that you're better than that. People get lost on that, but the truth is a lot of addicts know that they're better than what they are. That's why they feel so much shame. But for me, turned into a process guy from that Ironman, and it's just led to a million other things.
Isn't it interesting that peace of mind is often a result of a strained physical body? Mm-hmm. If that makes sense. Isn't it just strange how that works? It's like, I remember hearing a podcast, I think it was Laird Hamilton, and he was talking about his daughter or something was having sleep issues, and he's like, well, are you working out? She's like, no. And so then she started playing tennis for a couple hours a day, and then all of a sudden her sleep started coming right back. Obviously there's different issues and things like that, but it's just interesting how if you push your body, like, your body's going to sleep. Like, if you train hard enough, you're gonna go to sleep.
You ever fell asleep on the floor somewhere?
Yeah.
That's because you were tired. Mm-hmm. Right? You can recreate that in your adulthood. You just got to make yourself tired. A lot of people don't allow themselves to get there anymore.
Do you think that's something that a lot of people in sobriety or recovery, or whatever you want to call it, they miss out on, or do they skip on that? Like, do you think that's, because I don't really hear a lot of people talking about the actual physical strain part, but I feel like that would be a super integral part to actually recovering.
You get both. There's people that have sustained sobriety and recovery that are 400 pounds and smoke 3 packs a day, and that's their life. Mm-hmm. That's their choice. Then you get the other ones that are wired a little bit on the other end of things that like you can tell they put in work. They're just working and moving their body. I don't think you can have sound mind without sound body, and vice versa, right? I think those two things work in conjunction with each other in such a unique way. Like you have to have it, or else you're not really good. You would struggle to convince me that you're in a good headspace if you're 300 pounds. Mm-hmm. It'd be hard to convince me of that. Maybe you could, but it's like celebrating these plus size models. I don't want to hear that shit. What are we talking about? They're not happy. Why are we promoting someone to make other people feel good when they're not happy? They're not okay. Maybe they are. I shouldn't say that, but like, it's hard to convince me of that because I was that. I know what that feels like. It doesn't feel good. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think you get both in sobriety and recovery, but like some of the best athletes, especially in the endurance world, come from addiction. Some of the best entrepreneurs in the business world come from addiction. And it's because they've learned to take their flaw and make it their greatest gift, their greatest asset, their greatest ally. And that's what I've tried to do. My addictive personality is alive and well. Like I will always be an addict. But today I'm damn proud of it. Mm-hmm. Like my addiction or my ability to get addicted to things gives me an opportunity to outwork anybody that I know. I dare them to keep up because I know they can't. I'll go to a deeper, darker place. I'm not afraid of it.
You've been there, yeah.
Yeah. I know what it looks like. I know what it feels like. I know how to get out of it. And so it's a gift. And I think that I don't think you can really be truly sober in its purest form unless you're willing to admit that addiction is alive and well and actually use it for something good.
And you just found it in different things, basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I tried everything. Just was like, all right. Well, if I get addicted, guess what? This is just the simple truth. If you get addicted to running, guess what you'll become better at?
Running.
If you if you get addicted to building your business, guess what grows?
Your business.
Your business. If you get addicted to drugs, guess what happens?
You do more drugs.
You do more drugs. Like it's not a complex theory by any means. But if it's always going to be there, why not use it for good? I see people that get sober that truthfully to me look miserable. And I don't want that. I didn't stay alive or get saved to just be that. I want more. Mm-hmm. I want to make up for everything that I missed and more. And so I don't know, man. I see both, but at the same time, like I don't think you can really be in it and really be good unless you are kind of taming that beast, if you will, and tapping into that.
Yeah, especially for a man. I don't know if I won't speak for a woman, but I know for a fact the times in my life where I played college sports as well, and I want to get into that in a minute, but after college sports, when I knew that I wasn't maybe training as hard as I should, and I've never gotten like, I was actually trying to hit 240 last year, and I like had to stop because I was like putting down 2 pounds a day. It's a freaking day, and it was just not okay. But I've been like up like 238, and even the times where I wasn't training as hard as I could have, I felt this dissonance, right? Like I don't know if I can actually explain it. So maybe it's more of like a male thing. I don't know, but I felt dissonance in my life when I knew that I wasn't training hard or consistently or was relying too much on my intellect and not on my actual physical body. Because there's a saying, my brother's probably going to listen to this. He always talks about it. His company's actually called Mensana for this reason. I think it's like Mensana incorporate something. It's Latin for strong mind in a strong body, I believe, which I think makes sense. I wanted to touch on, you played college football, correct? Mm-hmm. D1?
Yep.
Kent State?
Yep.
Nice. I played college baseball as well. One thing that I find a lot of people don't really talk about, I experienced it firsthand, without question, the most depressed, sad, lost, confused, anxious. I had never even known what anxiety was. I had friends and a girlfriend in high school that have anxiety, and I'm like, what are you anxious about? Mm-hmm. And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I can help you. And then literally I remember the day that it happened after college baseball ended, and I'm sitting here, my entire life I've been a baseball player. That was one of the first things that came up in conversation. Why are you going to Virginia Tech? Baseball. What do you do in the offseason? Baseball. What? Baseball. that ended, and I had this like legitimately, I had an identity crisis. I'm like, what? Well, who am I then if I'm not a baseball player? Mm-hmm. If there was this thing that I was, and now I'm no longer that thing, then what's going to fill the space? Did you have a similar experience leaving college football?
Identical. I woke up, so I graduated in December of 2012. Our bowl game was like January 6th or January 7th, 2013. So I'd graduated 3 weeks prior to the bowl game. And the bowl game's a whole different story. I got off the team plane I got blacked out the night before. I had a massive anxiety attack. Got off the team plane and drove to Alabama from Ohio for the bowl game and met my teammates down there. But the reason I tell that part of the story, like, we were there for 7 days. We play the bowl game. I wake up the next day. I'm not a college student. I'm not a football player. The only thing that I even know how to do outside of those two things is party. I have no job. I have no clue what I want to do with my life. I had a degree in education. I wanted to be a teacher. Or I also had a minor in justice studies so I could be a cop. But by this time I had a full-blown like alcohol problem, and I was snorting Adderall like they were going out of style. So there was no, how was I going to be a teacher or a cop?
Yeah.
So I just felt screwed, bro. I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with any of this. I'm lost. I'm stuck. And I think that experience alone helped or assisted in pushing me towards hard drugs, because I tried to hide the fact that I was scared to do coke for the longest time until one night I got so drunk and I actually did it. And it was the feeling that it mirrored for me was running out of a tunnel with God knows how many people, going absolutely nuts, not a care in the world. You can't feel anything, right? Like, you know, those experiences, like you make a big play or whatever, it doesn't matter. Like, you can get like, people don't understand, you can literally get the air knocked out of you, like the wind knocked out of you. But if something big enough just happened, you don't even know right away, right? It's the craziest high you've ever experienced. Cocaine gave me that. I was like, oh, I found it. Like, this is what I'll do. And it's not like a poor man's drug. This is like what the rich people are doing. I'll figure out a way to make enough money to do that. And it allows me to drink longer. And now I don't black out. And now I'm not an asshole at all these events. So it was like, I don't know, man. It was kind of like that transition for me, probably the hardest one of my life. And there wasn't a lot of conversation back then about preparation for that. Mm-hmm. They weren't saying like, hey, make sure you got your ducks in a row when this is over. You know, y'all aren't going pro. Hate to tell you.
Yeah.
You know, maybe one or two of y'all got a shot. But the rest of y'all, you got to go into the real world. You got to be productive members of society. If you're not preparing for that, you're going to fall on your face. And there was a ton of guys that happened too. I got teammates that are dead, teammates that are in jail, teammates that are still in their hometown, like that they never are going to do anything. And it's because they can't let go of that identity. And I held on to it for a long time too. But, you know, it's not on my page, right? Like, you go to my Instagram, it doesn't say former D1 football player. Like, I could care less now. It doesn't mean I don't love it and appreciate it and have gratitude for it, but it's not part of my identity anymore. Mm-hmm. I left it on my page forever, bro. I was like, yeah, wait.
So people know, yeah.
Shit goes to my page. Like, he used to, you know. But once you can separate from that and realize that your identity, again, is created daily by what you do, you can't put me in a box. You can't put me on a hashtag. Like, I'm going to beat it tomorrow. So I'm going to update my profile daily. No thanks. So, I mean, I don't know. I think the identity crisis thing is super real. It definitely hits athletes, I think, harder than most people, because not only is it your identity, it's your dream. You know what I mean? You lose your dream and your identity.
Yeah.
And it's a very confusing time.
Yeah. Well said. There's also this element of, where are all your friends? Mm-hmm. So what happens is you associate friendship, purpose, your training, your nutritional habits, the whole damn reason I went to school, like probably maybe the same for you.
Yep.
You associate all these things with the sport. And so when the sport's gone, now, oh, well, damn, literally all my best friends throughout my entire life were from baseball. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, the only reason I ever trained was to get better at a sport. The only reason I went to school was for a sport, X, Y, Z, yada, yada, yada. So there is this like confusion of like, oh, well, what do I do now? One thing that I find fascinating is pattern recognition in people returning to hometowns, I think it's an interesting thing to study. You returned to your hometown afterwards?
I did.
How did that impact you?
Greatly, because I'd had this loss of identity we just talked about. But when I got back home, people weren't just like smoking some weed and, drinking some beers anymore. The hard stuff was out to play. And even then I swore I'd never do it, But I tell kids this, you spend enough time in the wrong place, you're going to do the wrong thing. It doesn't matter how smart you are, how stubborn you are, how much faith you have. It don't matter. You sign up for it over and over again, you're eventually going to become it. And that was kind of the story. I was around it all the time, and eventually it happened. And that was a big thing for me. Like, I think my mom thought, okay, we'll bring him home. He'll be
Protected,
safe.
Yeah.
Like
he's
we'll be able to
here.
figure this out. And I was there about a year and a half, almost 2 years. And my mom was like, you got to get out of here. I had an opportunity to go to work in Florida. I took it, and I tell kids this too. Environment is important, but if you don't fix whatever's going on inside, you're just going to be that in a new place. And so when I got to Florida, it just got worse. But it all really kicked off in Virginia when I got back home.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in environment being important, especially for habits. I find there's an idea called mimetic desire, mimetic theory. You're basically explaining it. It's you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Mm-hmm. We try. I don't know. I've tried to do this where it's like if you hang out with 5 people that do a thing, it could be a phenomenal thing. It could be training. It could be going to jiu-jitsu or martial arts. It could be. That's literally the reason I started jiu-jitsu. I listened to enough podcasts where I'm like, it like ingrained in my brain. Same thing with hard drugs. If you're spending time with people that are doing hard drugs all the time, you are a fool to think that you're just going to walk through that unscathed.
Right.
So it's just interesting how it's. But for me, I think it's actually a pretty simple solution. I think there's this idea of overcoming or blocking, like a certain vice. I think both are important. Overcoming is the long-term goal, to be able to be in a situation where there's your drug of choice, whatever that may be for anybody, that you can say, you know what? No, that's actually not me. I have no interest in that. I think that blocking or environment curation on the front end is very important to help create new habits. Mm-hmm. And the other thing about this, I think that moving to a place like Austin, being intentional about who you're surrounding yourself with, you have an opportunity. I experienced this when I graduated from Virginia Tech, then transferred to VCU my 5th year. And you have this opportunity, and I didn't know anybody going to VT either. So it's like this new environment and then new environment. You do have an opportunity, if you're intentional, to kind of just create who you want to be. Because it's a new place, so you don't have any of these habits that you're associated with or that you associate with your environment. Your friends aren't there to be like, hey, dude, you want to go out tonight? Or your friends are, hey, you want to do some coke? Hey, you want to do this? You have new friends, so you get to choose who you spend time with, what group that you become acquainted with. You get to decide what gym you go to, all these things. So I think that's really important, at least it has been for me, in the post-athlete career confusion, chaos, is saying, okay, well, who do I want to be? Mm-hmm. Okay, I want to be this person. Well, where do those people hang out? Okay, I'll go there and then see what happens. And that's been pretty fruitful. I wonder if that's, since you've been in Austin, have you experienced that?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a great question. But for me, I think I needed isolation too. Mm. I needed time with myself. And people would say, like, oh, that's just punishment and that's just this and that. Call it what you want. That's what I needed. Because I knew how to manipulate situations to use other people's feelings to help create happiness within me, whether that was through validation or laughs or whatever. And so I think that I needed time with myself to learn how to be good with myself. Once I became better with myself, and understood what I wanted to be, I was able to seek different levels of community. But I still struggle finding people that I align with. Like I do. Circle's small, man. And it's not because they don't exist or that good people aren't out there. It's not that at all. It's just that I don't do well in the large crowd environment, right? Where it's like everyone is acting like they're the same. I just can't buy it because I've been the person acting like I was the same in order to fit in. And there's no way that they're all the same. And so I don't do great at big things like that, but like connection is important, community is important, environment is important. And like environment in the sense of like, to your point, if for a very simple explanation, say in Alabama, drugs are legal and running rampant, right? But in Georgia, there's a guarantee that there's not a single substance in that state. Well, yeah, if you send everybody to Georgia, they're going to be sober. What happens when they leave Georgia, right? Mm-hmm. What if they go back to Alabama? Are they still going to stay sober? Hopefully they had enough time by blocking it that they've been able to like gather this information about themselves that they don't want to be that. But I think that has to happen in conjunction with the work to address the root. It's both things. When I first got sober, they're like no major life changes. That being your career, don't move. Like that's a sign of relapse. Like you're gonna relapse. Like all these things. And I literally just like scoffed at it. I was like, no. My environment that I'm in right now is the one that I do drugs in. It's the one that I drink in. It's the one that I frequent establishments that I shouldn't be spending all my time in. But if I go to this new place, to your point, and I surround myself with people who are on this similar path or journey, then I don't have to do those things anymore. And that's kind of how it went for me. You know, I blocked it by leaving, and it worked for me because it gave me enough time with myself and through the right community to be like, I don't want that anymore. I'm going to go this direction. So I get the value in environment for sure, but I don't think sobriety is encompassed by one thing. I think it's really all of it. It all plays a role.
Yeah, you can't have one without the other. That's it's an interesting thing, man. Like I said, I mean, I actually want to get your thoughts on this. One of my favorite quotes of all time, Abraham Lincoln. It has been my experience that a man with no vices often has no virtues. Mm-hmm. How does it hit for you?
That's a tough one, man, because I believe, this is my stance on it, I believe everyone has vices. Most men won't admit them, right? But I think to reach your virtuous or virtue, right, that state, you have to be able to admit what your vices are. You have to show weakness to have strength. And I don't know if that's what he was saying at all. But to me, it's like, you damn right you can't have that without the other. Like you need both. But everyone has both, I believe, or the opportunity for both. I don't have anybody that I know that doesn't have a crutch or a vice.
Yeah, if you get to know them past the first level.
Yeah, there's something there.
Yeah.
You know, and that's okay. We all got it. Mm-hmm. But the ones who are willing to be like, hey, this is a problem, I'm going to do something about it, those are the people that reach their highest potential, right? But I don't think everyone has the same level of awareness. I don't believe in this idea that we're all equal. I just don't. And you know, I think that we all have different strengths, weaknesses. That's what makes us who we are. That's what makes us valuable and special. But some people don't have awareness, right? Some people aren't even aware that they have a vice to do anything about it. But that's a good quote by him. I like it. It's wise.
Yeah. So Noah Heisman, who, mm-hmm. you know, I had him on recently, and we talked about this quote because we came to the conclusion, I agree with this. It's not that it's not a man who it's more so the men who hide their vices or pretend like they have none, that have no virtues. And how great would it be if we called Abe and we're like, hey man, what do you mean by that? Yeah. But that to me, it's like, it's kind of what you're getting at. It's the admittance that we have vices and the fact that we actually get to choose them. Mm-hmm. Reality. So like, your vice could be drugs or it could be working out. Your vice could be pick your poison, you know, like we get to choose. But for me, it's the acceptance of the fact that we all have vices. Nobody on this earth is perfect. and the acceptance of that and the attempted, not remediation, but the attempted like growth through those bad vices or like removal of the bad vices is where the virtue comes. And I totally agree. It kind of stems back to the roots touch hell and heaven, like the polarity of everything. You can't have one without the other. You simply can't.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I wanted to get your thoughts on that. This is the last thing. I think we're about to run out of time, but you have a lot of tattoos.
Mm-hmm.
Is there one that sticks out to you as the most meaningful, or one that means the most to you?
I've never been asked that question. Probably my back. I mean, my back, I've got my logo across my entire back. It just says "Ain't Dead Yet." So probably that one. But, you know, I got a lot of these before I got sober on 6th Street in Austin. Some of them in Ohio. And then post-sobriety, I've gotten a lot more. But for me, tattoos for me are like, here you go. Here are my vices, right? These represent a certain time in my life I had a certain vice, and I can tell you what it was. I remember the night I got this star done. The guy that did it ended up getting shot in the head like 3 weeks after that by his wife. He lived. Crazy story.
Wow.
But he tattooed this star for my hometown. It was in Austin, Texas. But I was so drunk this night, and I was on like so many ibuprofen for painkillers. My blood was literally just like oozing out of my body. Dang. And he was like, dude, I gotta stop. I'm like, you can't, dude. You got half a star. Like, that looks stupid. They all have all these stories though. And so for me, people ask like, oh, did you ever get them removed or change them? And I'm like, no, it's the same as anything else. Like, you can just see these, right? But every person is walking around tattooed as fuck, right? They just might not be in ink on their skin. We're all tattooed. And so for me, I don't know, man. I like that. I like that anybody can, my kids one day can be like, hey dad, like, what's that one mean? Like, what was going on? And I can give them a story that will hopefully help them. Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't have to be like, oh yeah, this owl is for wisdom. I can tell them the story behind why I got the owl and that night and what it looked like and why they shouldn't do those things. You know, so for me, it's just another part of my billboard and my story. It happened.
I love that answer. I have tattoos as well, not as many, but it's interesting. It's like I found two things. Number one, I do remember exactly like what was going on when I got each one, and I also think it's cool that the meaning has changed over time for certain of them, for a few of them, which I also think is cool because there's this idea that when you read a book, if you read it again, the book didn't change, you changed. That's why you can get different meanings from listening to the same conversation, talking to the same person, whatever it is. We change, and it's cool to like look back. It's almost scars in a way. Like they are physical representations of an emotional scar, maybe a mental scar that you have, as opposed to getting punched in the eye where you have a physical scar. Mm-hmm. You can look back and remember exactly what you were feeling, thinking, and doing.
Yeah, I know what relationship I was in. You can tap into those things, but again, it's because I think painful moments create memories. And like, I don't know, I'm definitely not the psycho that sits in the chair that's like, this is awesome. It hurts to me. Mm-hmm. It's getting tattoos hurts. But I can tell you what was happening, like you said, in each of those moments. And most of it was negative a lot of times. But after I got sober, it became really positive. The first time I really cried after I got sober was when I got my back done. And the guy who still tattoos me this day, his name's Juan. He's down in New Braunfels. Incredible artist. But he was tattooing my back. It was like 10 hours straight, like just digging. And he told me probably like 5-6 hours in, he's like, Trip. He's like, you told me the story behind this tattoo. He's like, you're safe here, bro. Let it out. And I just fucking, like it all came out. I mean, it was bad. There's a puddle on the floor. I'm getting emotional now even thinking about it. It was like everything that I'd held on to at that point for 32 years came out of my body at once. And I remember him like chuckling, and I was like, whoa. I was like, why are you laughing? You know? And he's like, cause I know the feeling, brother. He's like, it feels good, doesn't it? And I said, yes, it does. And so that's probably why that one's the most meaningful. And then it was, once I got in, it was full ownership of the Ain't Dead Yet thing. It was like, okay, well, no turning back now. Like,
It's like your new last name on your jersey almost.
yeah, it's an identity. But
What a power to hold as that guy, the Juan. Like what a cool thing to be able to like open the space for you to be able to do that.
Yep.
And that's not a lot of men don't have that space. That said, I think it's cool what you're doing to kind of tie this full circle. I think that you're doing that for these young kids that you're talking about, for these people that listen to your podcast, the people that are coming on your podcast, people that follow your page, the people that you interact with on a day-to-day. Honestly, yeah, this ties full circle to the beginning of this conversation. The openness with which you share your stories, of triumphs and of the agonies of defeat that you have. I think it opens the space for men to do what you did on that table and sort of like let themselves go and relieve themselves of some shame, guilt, depression, anxiety, whatever it may be. So I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you sharing all these stories and insights. It's a pleasure to know you, and I look forward to another one.
No, it's been a blessing, man. It's been great, and I appreciate the opportunity. It means the world to me. I was having a conversation right before I came in here, and the person I was talking to was like, You're recording another podcast today? I was like, no, I'm on one. And they were like, oh, that's really special. Like that's got to feel really great. And so, man, it's my honor. Mm-hmm. I've been keeping up with your stuff since you started, as you know, and stay ahead of the curve. That's all I'll put it for you. You're younger than me. You know, you're ahead of the curve. I didn't catch the curve till 30. So stay on the curve. You're in a good spot, bro. And what you're doing is going to help a lot of people. You just got to stay in it.
I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, man, of course.
Right on, dude.